September 1943. An advanced landing ground near Foggia, Italy. The rain is less a shower and more a sustained, relentless flood. Technical Sergeant Thomas Mac McDougall curses, wiping a layer of mud and water from his face shield. He's standing ankle-deep in a miserable, ruined stretch of Italian farmland that the Allied command optimistically calls ALGY-3. Around him, men of the U.S. Army engineers are fighting a losing battle against the terrain. Every time a P-51 Mustang or a B-25 Mitchell lands, the earth gives way. Propeller wash kicks up not dust, but thick, sucking black mud that clogs landing gear, ruins engines, and eats morale. This is the heart of the problem for the Allied air campaign across the Mediterranean, and soon across the Channel. Air superiority is useless if you cannot land your planes to refuel and rearm. "Another washout, Mac," calls Lieutenant David Rourke, gesturing toward a transport truck hopelessly stuck in the mire, its tires spinning uselessly. "That makes 3 today. We lose more fighter hours to mud than to the Luftwaffe." The traditional solution, concrete, is impossible. It requires tons of aggregate, weeks of curing time, and leaves an immobile, obvious target for German artillery. The clock is ticking toward the largest invasion in history. Operation Overlord. Every planner knows that once the assault hits the beaches of Normandy, Allied air power must follow immediately. But Normandy is coastal farmland, prone to rain, soft earth, and massive craters left by naval shelling. Landing an entire air force onto the continent within days, not months, seems like an impossible engineering dream. The demands are contradictory. The landing surface must be portable enough to be carried by trucks and ships, durable enough to handle the weight of a fully loaded fighter plane, light enough not to sink into soft ground, and capable of being installed by untrained GIs within hours. It is a logistical nightmare with no historical precedent. But far away, in the quiet halls of American wartime innovation, a simple yet revolutionary solution is being tested. A solution that started not with military engineers, but with an architect. Late 1941, Langley Field, Virginia, United States. The man behind the revolution wasn't a general or a metallurgist. He was Alfred B. Gregory, an architect focused on structures and form. Gregory's genius lay in observation. He noted that drainage grates and temporary pedestrian walkways used a simple, interlocking grid structure. Could this simple principle be scaled up to support a 5-ton fighter plane? The idea was the Perforated Steel Planking, PSP, soon famously nicknamed the Marston Mat after the North Carolina base where it was first tested. It was a metal plank, roughly 10 feet long and 15 inches wide, punctured with hundreds of large holes. But the real ingenuity was in the edges. One side had simple hooks, the other corresponding eyes. They locked together without bolts, forming a seamless, flexible runway. The first tests were met with immense skepticism. Engineers scoffed at the Swiss cheese metal, arguing that the holes would weaken the surface and the interlocking hooks would fail under heavy load. The sheer tonnage required for a single 5,000-foot runway, hundreds of thousands of these individual mats, seemed logistically insane. But the tests proved the scoffers wrong. The holes weren't a weakness, they were the solution. They allowed water to drain through the matting, preventing pooling and stopping the mud from sucking the mats downwards. The slightly flexible interlocking grid distributed the enormous weight of landing aircraft, like the heavy P-47 Thunderbolt, across a massive area, transforming a soft field into a surprisingly resilient landing strip. The mats could be laid down at a blistering pace. 400 men could limb an entire 5,000-foot runway in less than 24 hours. This wasn't just a new material, it was a new philosophy. The airfield was no longer a fixed installation but a weapon of mobility. By early 1944, American factories were stamping out these mats at an astonishing rate. Millions of square feet rolling off assembly lines across the nation. The supply chains were being choked, not with planes, but with the runways needed to house them. The logistical impossibility that Sergeant McDougall faced in Italy was about to be solved by an architect's elegant, perforated grid.
June 7, 1944. A farm field near Sainte-Mère-Église, Normandy, France. ALG A1. The silence after the relentless naval bombardment is almost louder than the explosions themselves. Sergeant McDougall, now assigned to the 816th Engineer Aviation Battalion, isn't wrestling with Italian mud this time. He's ankle-deep in the damp, churned earth of Normandy, just one day after the D-Day landings. His job is no longer to fight the mud, but to conquer it. Around him, hundreds of exhausted, dust-covered engineers are performing a logistical miracle. Transport ships have discharged their cargo, not just tanks and trucks, but massive, neatly stacked bundles of the Marston matting. The air is thick with the sound of shovels and the metallic clatter of the PSP planks being dropped. The men work with frantic urgency, knowing that every minute gained translates into fighter cover for the infantry struggling inland. The system is brutally simple and effective. Lay the first row, then simply hook the next row into place with a definitive clack. No heavy equipment is needed beyond a few bulldozers to level the worst craters. By the evening of June 9th, just 3 days after the initial landings, ALG-A1 is operational. Major General Elwood Quesada, commanding the 9th Tactical Air Force, watches the first squadron of P-47 Thunderbolts land. The ground, which just 48 hours earlier was a quiet French farm, now supports the immense weight of fully armed fighters. This instant application of air power was unprecedented. German commanders were surprised, stunned. They expected Allied air support to operate from bases in England for weeks, limiting sortie times over the beachhead. Instead, American fighters were taking off from A1 just minutes from the front lines, providing immediate, smothering close air support. This ability to instantly project power was the true genius of Gregory's impossible idea. The PSP matting didn't just build runways. It cemented Allied dominance over the crucial Norman skies, ensuring the beachhead would hold. August 1944, Western France, following the breakout from Normandy. The Marston Mat proved its worth not just in creation but in unprecedented mobility. As the Allied armies broke out of the restrictive Norman hedgerows and dashed across France, the airfields did not lag behind. They leapfrogged. For Sergeant McDougall and the Engineer Aviation Battalions, the work became a continuous cycle of dismantling and reconstructing. When a German counterattack was feared, they would lay down a quick 2-day airstrip. When the front moved 50 miles east, they would unhook the mats, load them onto trucks, and reconstruct the entire ALG, advanced landing ground, near the new battle zone. The single strip could be disassembled, moved, and fully operational in a new location in less than 72 hours, a rate of relocation that defied all pre-war military doctrine. The enduring myth was that the Allies simply had more planes. The reality was more subtle and more devastating to the Wehrmacht. The Allies had airfields everywhere. This constant aerial presence shattered German morale and logistics. German troop movements were impossible during daylight. Supply trucks were incinerated. Even local railway lines were constantly strafed by fighters operating from fields the Germans had assumed were still too far behind the lines to pose a threat. The simplicity of the matting, the perforated holes, the interlocking hooks,
became a symbol of the American ability to simplify complex industrial and logistical problems with elegant, mass-produced solutions. By the time the Allied armies reached the German border in late 1944, over 100 million square feet of PSP had been manufactured and deployed globally. Alfred Gregory's impossible idea, the metal lace laid upon the mud, didn't just save time. It saved lives, ensured air superiority over Europe, and ultimately defined the speed and scale of the Allied advance, transforming soft French earth into the unyielding foundation of victory. It was the perfect industrial answer to the problem of modern warfare, the weapon of mobility that built thousands of airfields overnight.